Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a show that a lot of us watched. Some of us loved it, some of us hated it. Some of us enjoyed Pokemon more, seen by this poll I made. Anyway, this video is about Yu-Gi-Oh! So I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. So a lot of us grew up with the 4Kids dub and not the original Japanese dub. And if you're wondering why I'm holding my hand like this, the 4Kids dub really just turned people off from watching the original Japanese or even just checking out the manga. And a lot of people probably don't even know about Season 0, which I talked about in the terrible video I made back in 2017. Like Dark Yugi, I suppose, would be a... So this could be considered the remake, as Hollywood and video games are making a bunch of remakes. So I'm like, well, you know what? I'll make a remake of my own video, because why not? Subscribe. This video, I'm going to focus on Season 0 for the most part. It's game time. Game Yu-Gi-Oh! Wasn't always about duel monsters. Yu-Gi-Oh! It was actually just about games in general, card games, dice games, D&D, random games that, you know, people just like to enjoy. Shadow games wasn't really a thing. They called it the Yamino games. To the death for the most part. Now, there are some instances where the person didn't die, and that's all well and dandy, but at the very least, they were mentally destroyed. Like this first example here. This bully here is bullying everybody. He wanted money. He was, you know, give me the money, blah, 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 blah. So Yugi ends up tying this man to a tower. Yugi's also tied on it himself. He puts a bunch of cards lined up, and let's say, you know, you pick up a card, it's a 10. You walk up 10 steps to the tower, claim your prize. You get a 2, you walk up 2 steps, and essentially it's just like a tug of war. Well, you see, Yugi got knew this bully was not going to play by the rules. He was going to cheat, and because of that, he just kind of let the man fall, and in this man's mind, he made it seem like he was getting eaten by these like worm creatures, and essentially he got hospitalized because he was so mentally drained. That was just a crazy little moment, and that's just from episode 1. But in the manga, Yugi is playing 5-finger fillet with the bully. You know, you have your 5 fingers out with the knife, and you got to get in between. The thing is, the money's in the middle, so if he messes up, he's going to stab the money. But this bully decides, you know what, I'm just going to stab Yugi. Die, Yugi. And as a punishment for cheating in the Yami game, essentially he just makes it seem like there's money all around this bully, and his greed is his downfall. He's just like, oh, I'm all full of greed, ha ha ha, money everywhere. And everyone's like, what is wrong with this guy? He's all greedy. That's kind of the big thing here. Whereas in the anime, it's different, where they make him seem so defeated and so sad and like, oh, I'm scared, and like a big baby boy. Manga, they made him seem like so gleeful with all the money he had. Which version did you like better? And there's another part in the manga where Joey's just getting bullied, and well, this guy is part of the broadcasting on ZTV, so essentially he can make Joey look like a laughing stock. So what ends up happening is Yugi plays a dice game with this guy, and well, when he loses this dice game, he sees nothing but mosaic. That's his punishment. As a TV broadcaster, that's probably not very good to not be able to see anything and just have everything essentially censored. Episode 2. I want to call everybody by the English names just to make things a little bit easier. Some people might not know that Anzu is Taya, so here we go. Taya has a job at a restaurant. Everybody's there having a grand old time, but Taya gets taken hostage by a man with a gun, and well, what do all bad guys want? Tobacco and alcohol, obviously. So he asks Yugi to go get it. Yugi graciously gives it to him. But the problem is this bad guy slaps Taya, and Yugi's counterpart, Atom, just does not like that. So he goes, you know what? We'll go into the Yami game. It's a game of life or death. They play their game. Essentially what the game is, you have your 10 fingers. You can't move any finger except for the one finger you choose. Yugi chose the thumb. The bad guy obviously shows his pointer finger so he could pull the trigger. You know, it is what it is. But here's the kicker. Yugi didn't light the man's cigarette, okay? Well, that's why he chose the thumb, so he could get the lighter out and just flick it, light the man's cigarette. The man was gonna shoot immediately, but then he was like, oh yeah, as soon as Yugi pulled out the lighter, he's like, oh yeah, he didn't light my cigarette. I'll let him light the cigarette, and then I'll bang bang. Well, Yugi lights the cigarette, right? But he drops the lighter right on the man's arm. This man is pouring vodka. Apparently it's 90%, and it's pouring out of the cup, and the lighter's right there where his gun hand's at. So like if he fires, the lighter's gonna fall, and well, he's gonna burn to death essentially. Well, man breaks the rules, gets the lighter out with the other hand, and let me tell you, as you've seen before, as I told you about, if you cheat in the Yami games, you get a terrible punishment. Well, he was gonna fire at Yugi, but he fires up in the air because Yugi hits him with the beam, I guess, like with the confusion ray. He's like, ah! So he shoots up in the air. Now, he's not actually burning. In the manga, though, this guy's getting burnt to a crisp, completely incinerated. I don't know how the legal system works on that. If it's he did it to himself, I don't want to say the word because YouTube, but just bruh. I'm just absolutely flabbergasted because the manga is so much worse, and it is exactly how I remember it. I'm watching the anime a little bit to kind of recap myself, and then I'm like, wait a minute. Wow. I'm assuming it's a time slot thing as to the reason why the anime wasn't as brutal, or it's just something like, oh, kids might watch it. I don't know how that really works, but that's just crazy. But to this man, he's burning like uncontrollably, and he is dying. You're like, and everyone's just looking at him like, why is he freaking out? And, you know, that's that. Essentially, he had his terrible death in his own mind. That's Yu-Gi-Oh for you, I guess. Season 0. On to episode 3. All right, and episode 3 isn't actually as crazy as the other two, as it's actually when Duel Monsters is revealed and Seto Kaiba is here with green hair for whatever reason. It's actually a lot like the original pilot of Yu-Gi-Oh that we know and love. So how this one is well, Seto Kaiba is just yoinking kids of their cards from school to school. Obviously, he gets to Yugi school and he notices that his grandpa has the Blue Eyes White Dragon. He wants it. He essentially steals the card and switches it with a copy. Yugi notices, but he's like, I thought you were going to return it, and he didn't. You know, they play their card game. Yu-Gi-Oh BS. The game ends up being a draw. You'll lose one day. Yugi gets the card back. Yeah, nothing too crazy here, just other than Kaiba just, I'll get my revenge. So, plot. I just want to know how Yugi fit all that bread in his mouth, dog. It's like the anime trope, but it's usually not with the male leads. I just find this really funny. Episode 4. So we saw schoolgirl Yugi. That's all well and dandy. That's really cool. But I'm going to go quickly on this because I felt like the episode was a little bit lackluster. Tristan likes this girl. She gives him her watch. Borrow. Tristan takes care of the watch to the best of his ability. They go to the arcade. He stupidly puts it in his back pocket. Yugi takes him to the back room so they could play their shadow game. He has to stop the watch on the correct number. The catch is there's a pendulum, so you got to time it perfectly. If you mess up, your arm is going to get smacked by that pendulum. Your arm's either going to get lopped off or you're going to get stabbed through. Man loses. Cheats like every other guy, essentially. And, well, he sees clockwork in his hand. He sees a bunch of watches all over, like inside of his skin. His eyes are now watches. His eyes are now just the analog clock, I guess is the best way to put it. Yeah, this guy's mentally destroyed, just like everyone else. And as for the manga, I couldn't find this exact scenario in the manga. The closest thing I could find was the shoe thief sort of thing. So Joey buys these shoes for a lot of money. You know, he got them designer shoes, you know, looking all cool. The man said, hey, watch out if you wear those shoes on the street. There's going to be some bad men that probably try to take it because, you know, the shoes are really nice. Turns out that this guy was right. They get jumped, the shoes get stolen, but it turns out that the person who sold the shoes actually sends thugs to steal the shoes back so he can just make more money. The shoe owner has a pet scorpion. Well, Yugi's shadow game involves the scorpion. Essentially, he drops like a bunch of money in the shoe and he says, let's play a game. Let's see how much money we could pull out of the shoe without getting stung by the scorpion. Well, let's just say this guy's greed gets the most of him and he essentially gets his hand stuck in the shoe. And he loves the money so much that he's just like, give me all the money, give me all the money. Doesn't really care that his scorpion is going to possibly die because he grabs a knife to try to pry his hand out, not really caring if he stabs the scorpion. Well, it turns out the scorpion stings them. Man gets poisoned to the hospital. And it's just kind of funny because they're all like, so you poisoned him and he went to the hospital? And he's just like, yeah. And they're just like, well, I guess we can't go back there. like what? Isn't that kind of like a criminal offense? Again, I don't understand how the legal system works in this world. I just find that really funny. I'm gonna leave it at that. On to episode 5. So episode 5 is pretty interesting. Shaddy's finally introduced. I like to call this episode the Night of the Museum. Yugi and friends go to the museum, and the museum director essentially asked Yugi if he could have his Millennium Puzzle displayed. He happily agrees. So it turns out that these guys are not very good guys, the museum director and such. Shaddy just puts them in some Yami games, absolutely wrecks them. And when Shaddy eventually gets to Yugi, he's like, this kid's kind of interesting. He goes into Yugi's mind, and well, what he finds is what you would find in the anime later on. It's a maze. There's 2 rooms. One's Yugi, one's Atem's. And well, man just kind of gets tricked into his own little world and falls, almost dies. Atem essentially is like, you all good? But while this is happening, Yugi is just standing there like, are you okay? Shadow's just like, this kid's interesting. Now in the manga, it's basically the same events. The only difference is during these Yami games, those 2 people, the director and stuff, they die. And just like the anime, it continues on. Shaddy meets Yugi. He goes into his mind. The trap happens. And then, you know, Yugi's like, my hand is in a trap, etc., etc. That's where the anime ends. In the manga, Shaddy essentially turns a lot of people into his puppets I like to say zombies, because I mean, just look at the paneling and everything. They look zombified. But Shadi is controlling them, and the Yugi gang just has to figure out how to get out of this situation. I can keep going on and on about the manga if you want me to. Let me know down below in the comments. I'll continue on this series and make more videos. I just think that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is so interesting, especially these earlier chapters, essentially because it wasn't just the card game. In conclusion, if you are still watching, thank you so much. I'd appreciate it if you liked and subscribed and left some comments and talked amongst yourselves, because I know Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a big part of a lot of people's childhoods. And a lot of people might not even know about these earlier seasons, these earlier manga chapters or anything like that. So please discuss them in the comments, just talk amongst yourselves and have a good time. Appreciate all of you guys once again. Thanks for watching. Let's go to the outro.